How's it going, everyone? It is Prashan here, and I have Tucker here with me. How's it going, Tucker?
Hey, yo, it is great to be here, Prashan. As always, it is our favorite time of the week. We are here to talk about the new card, give you guys some decks to help you win the weekend with those weekend missions, some Infinity Conquest, and help you guys hit Infinite if you guys have not hit Infinite just yet.
Yeah, for sure. And we have Anti-Venom here. Anti-Venom, I don't know. The consensus for this card overall is that this card is trash. I'm still up on it. I think there's some potential. 4/7 on reveal. Set the cost and power of your cards, your deck's top card to 0. I have a shell with him that feels pretty good so far. But like, what do you think about this card so far, Tucker?
So, this is another one of those situations where we're grading a card 3 days after it came out, and it might have an opportunity to actually sustain itself in the meta. We did this with Ajax, we did this with Wiccan, we did this with Cannonball. The stats aren't great for this card right now, but I don't think it's found the perfect shell. There's definitely some good shells for this card, which we're actually going to talk about here. But I think we're just kind of ragging on this card a little too early, because when you look at what it does, it's actually kind of crazy. That unknown factor, maybe it's a better conquest than a ranked card. But think about Pixie when Pixie first came out. Of course, Pixie affects your entire deck, opposed to this being a single card. But single cards can flip the game on its head. So I just kind of feel like we're kind of overhating this card at the moment, and it's got a lot of potential, especially in some more of these mid-range shells, or this deck that Prashan's actually about to pull up to.
Yeah, I feel like the cookologists out there are just putting this into certain decks like Patriot, or they're putting in. I tried Mr. Negative, and it didn't really feel right. I found myself not playing the card. I put in Hella, it felt okay at times, but I did feel like it did feel better in this Ajax list that we have here. So we have Silver Sable, Hazmat, Scorpion, Shadow King, U.S. Agent, Valentina, Cosmo, Luke Cage, Red Guardian, Anti-Venom, Man-Thing, and Ajax. So with this deck overall, there's a lot of synergies with Agent Venom. So you do have the Shadow King that can help out. You have the Luke Cage that can help out. Valentina actually has value because she synergizes with the Luke Cage and the Shadow King. Better Hulkling, in my opinion. You have Cosmo to shut down certain decks and to protect your Luke Cage or your Ajax. And of course, you have US Agent, because pretty much this deck goes pretty low to the ground for the most part. And you have Red Guardian for disruption and affliction. And of course, there's the Hazmat, Silver Sable, Scorpion combo. So this felt the best for me. I played this in Conquest. I had much success, except for when I bumped into Arishem. But overall, this is the best deck for me that felt pretty good with Anti-Venom.
And I think the Affliction, like we're talking about, just feels like a really good home. It's more of a cost-effective, efficient list too. You're not really playing anything too expensive. You're not super greedy. If you hit something on the low end with Anti-Venom, it gives you some opportunity to play it later in the game. If you hit your high end, it's even better. It's probably a snap condition there. But this feels like the general shell. There's a couple pieces you could change out to whatever fits your fancy and whatever you keep seeing in your pocket meta. But I think this is really feeling like a solid home. You have the Shadow King for all of your bounce/destroy matchups. Also, like he was saying, to reset your Valentina cards or your Anti-Venom card if you don't have Luke Cage yourself. You also have your Silver Sable for that disrupt, that Hazmat for the disrupt. You have, US Agent, Man-Thing to afflict power in certain lanes. That's very targeted. It just feels like you have an answer for pretty much everything. And I think that's kind of what you're looking for with this kind of shell and with this kind of card. Isn't necessarily for that super crazy high roll, but it's just to be able to have an answer you can also throw out at the end of the game.
Yeah, and he's a 4/7, which is very, very solid stats. So I swear we're not getting paid by Second Dinner to hype up this card. It's all natural. And this Agent Venom deck has the best win rate so far. I figured Pixie and Agent Venom would go pretty well together as well. And then you have the Mobius here to just counter all of the Agent Venom stuff, just in case there's other people on the same page. Then you have Lady Deathstrike, which is pretty insane. You don't really see Lady Deathstrike that often. And then of course you have Goliath for disruption. You have Magneto for disruption. And you have your Luke Cage to help you out for your Anti-Venom and your Man-Thing Lings, especially with all the bounce. Like Man-Thing is like has tons of value. And then of course you have Nico. Nico's like your Swiss Army knife when it comes to Snap. Pretty much the best one drop in Snap. And I feel like it's okay. I don't know. Like this is a Pixie deck, but I feel like there's not that much jumbled up. There's not that much in that bag, that Pixie bag. Sometimes like I want to put like Wasp in just in case. That way you could get that high roll 0. But what do you feel about this deck here, Tuck?
So like Pershawn hit it on the head when he came to Lady Deathstrike, but Lady Deathstrike is probably one of the best cards in this list itself. Because Lady Deathstrike hitting your opponent's Luke Cage that's trying to save themselves from any affliction or from Anti-Venom stuff sets that Anti-Venom card back to 0 power. Also hitting other people's Mobiuses, hitting some of these Iron Man, some of these Thenas. Like this card is really good against the mid-range shell. I think this Pixie patch is like, like Prashant was saying, maybe it doesn't have a 0 cost card to be able to get some crazy high roll with Pixie, but even hitting just a couple of your high end with like just a lower cost really allows you to do some extra combos, I think, towards the end of the game. And like this is something I was thinking about. I remember when I saw Zombies post this list, I was like, okay, yeah, this looks like the sauce. And I think it's just the Pixie stuff. Like Anti-Venom does help in this list to help you get some of your crazy stuff potentially at the end of the game, but I think it's really you're relying on the Pixie high roll, and like it's a really good snap condition just with Pixie overall because your opponent, like I said earlier, doesn't know what's going to come out, what the power is, or what the cost is of every card, and it's a really good just snap condition. But I like it, I think, overall as a good shell because there's just so much what did they actually get kind of situation.
Yeah, for sure. And then next, we're going to a problem child in Marvel Snap, and that's Arishem. So you should be ashamed to play Arishem. I've been running into this in Conquest. This has cost me a few Infinity Borders so far. Of course, it's Arishem. You have every answer to every problem. You have your cable to cause some disruption. You have the Shadow King to stop whatever's going on. You have the Shang to take down big things, Enchantress. You have like Goliath here, and then if there's like just a bad location, just Crimson Cosmos, and you're playing bounce, like the game is over once you play Legion. So this, of course, has every answer. And then you have Loki, turn 1 Loki. You know that's bad. And if you have Quinjet, like it's an immediate snap if you're playing Arishem. And for some odd reason, it was quiet for a second, and all of a sudden, this creeped his 6-eyed head back into Marvel Snap.
Yeah, there was a lot of Dark Talk going around. Like people were stopping to play Arishem and stuff, but like as much as I don't like facing this list, it's a really good list. And, like I've said, we've told people in the past, spend your resources on Arishem. So I get it. It is probably the best shell to run in Conquest because we've been talking about all these unknown factors. There's so much unknown when it comes to Arishem that you can have some crazy snap conditions, even if you do not draw a single card from your deck. So, like, there's always that option. And then, of course, you're cabling, you're stealing your opponent's combos. What tech cards are you getting from Agent Coulson? Do you have an Goliath that you can play on turn 5 to offset whatever your opponent was going to do? Like, it just feels like this is definitely an answer to anything you want to play in Conquest. So if you want to win Infinity Conquest, you're going to face a lot of mirrors. You can play this list and win a lot. I'm hoping that something maybe happens in the future with Arishem, but it is definitely a great deck to play, especially in Conquest and Ladder. It's still in about 4% of matchups, which is towards the middle high end of like Untapped right now. I think only Discard and the Agent Venom list are the ones that have like a higher play rate. But you can totally steal cubes of this just with the unknown factor without even having to play Pixie or play Anti-Venom.
Yeah. And speaking of Conquest decks, this has been my Conquest go-to. I think this is pretty good overall against any other deck except for Arishem. That's the only one that gave me problems. But of course, you have like your Yondu, your Cable, your Zemo, your Gladiator, For the mill, you have Dr. Octopus to ruin whatever they have going on, whatever combo they're trying to set up. And Ghost is mainly the MVP because it allows you to go last. You could use your Enchantress, you could use your Shang-Chi, you could use your Shadow King, you could use your Killmonger. So the main point of this deck is not to have priority when you don't have Ghost out, but when you have Ghost out, you don't have to worry about that. You could just play the game and just counter whatever they have going on. And then Magic is a key piece of Mill because you just prolong the game even longer. And then hopefully by turn 7, they don't have anything in their deck, anything in their hand, and then you can just do whatever you want and you just win. So this is mainly my Conquest go-to. What do you think about this stuff?
I love playing Mill, and like it's not like a deck that normally like defines a meta, but I definitely would say like you're not seeing a lot of this right now, so it's a really good surprise factor against your opponents, especially when it comes to Conquest, because they are locked into this until their health bar reaches like 0. So like you can be really aggressive with your snapping, and like this iteration too is way more of a tech iteration. So like think of like Sera Tech, but like think of I'm also taking all of your cards. I don't necessarily need Sera. I also have an extra turn, and then I also have Doc Ock that's going to offset what you're trying to do. So like it's very disruptive. You have the Killmonger also to be able to play at the end of the game against especially these bounce shells because you have Ghost down. So it feels like we were talking about earlier, you have an in and out for like a lot of the matchups in the meta right now, and you definitely can steal some wins with this list. So I see what you're cooking, and I applaud you for playing this. And I think it's definitely it's something that's going to be solid in Conquest if you're not running into Arishem.
Oh yeah, for sure. Arishem is definitely a problem. And then let's go into the Sera Tech list. I haven't really seen this that much on Ladder and Conquest, but it looks pretty spicy. If you want to talk about this one, Tuck.
Yeah, so like think of original like Sera Miracle Monkey, where you're playing Sera, you have your Bishop, your Mysterios, your Monkey, and a bunch of stuff to throw down in the game. This also just gives you a bunch of tech options there. You're using your Invisible Woman to hide a Killmonger, hide a Shadow King, to really allow you to offset what your opponent's trying to do and set up some stuff later in the game. You have your Rogue to be able to steal maybe some of these Luke Cages, maybe even Iron Mans and stuff. So you have that just opportunity there. Sera, of course, is just incredible right now. There's no Mobius anywhere, so like the options you have being able to throw this later in the game. Agent Venom on turn 2 allows you to have 4-power Mysterios on every single lane. You have Gwenpool on top of that to be able to buff your cards so your opponent doesn't know what exactly is coming down with the Gwenpool buff as well. It just allows you really to either steal cubes or just counter a lot of the meta of what your opponent's playing. So I feel like this is just another really solid shell. You have the tech options, you have Hit Monkey, you're slamming stuff down, and then you got energy cheating too.
Yeah, overall it looks pretty good. And then next, what do we have here? We have some super giant shenanigans as well as my green screen shenanigans that's happening right now. So we have Scorn, Blade, Morbius, Grandmaster, Calling Wing, Gambit, Strong Guy, Dracula, Supergiant, Proxima, MODOK, and Apocalypse. For all of you that recently got Supergiant and don't know what to play her in, I think this is a solid list. I also use Scorn, one of the newer cards in Marvel Snap, and I feel like a staple going forward. And discard, and then you have Grandmaster here to just utilize your Blade, your Calling Wing to get your Gambit to go off again. And you can also hide what you're doing on turn 5, and it disrupts bounce. Like, as soon as you play that Supergiant on 4, most bounce players just leave because they realize they can't do what they need to do. And this is pretty much a solid list. And Strong Guy, I think Strong Guy definitely needs more love. He doesn't get the love he deserves in Snap, and it's good to just plug him in a list here.
Yeah, I think like Supergiant, honestly, in discard makes a lot of sense. I think it's something like people haven't really messed around with in a hot minute. I think it worked well. I think with like Perry was running Vampire Slayer and stuff too. And I think like this, the overall value you get with Scorn and Apocalypse is so solid. Of course, you'd play one of them out at the end of the game so you can get Strong Guy value. But like just being able to offset these combos, Supergiant counters whatever you're trying to do with Sera too. So like they can't play Sera on turn 5 either. So like it's just a really good counter card for a lot of the things people are just trying to set up right now. And it gives you the opportunity to set up your MODOK to be able to set up your combo later in the game. Like maybe you just drew a Morbius and you're like, well, I can't play Morbius right now, so you use Supergiant to offset that, and maybe you set up your pieces in such a way so Proxima is guaranteed to land in a different spot than she was going to land on turn 5. So I feel like you got a couple different ins and outs, and your opponent can't necessarily account for what's going to be under your Supergiant, especially if you're playing discard.
Right. Yeah. Very, very solid list when it comes to Snap. And what else do we have here? We have another top deck. We talked about this last week. It's still pretty good. I see this all the time in Conquest on ladder. We talked about this deck last week. I think we might have talked about it the week before. No, we didn't, because we weren't here. We weren't here the week before, but it was good the week before. And it's just a solid list. Like, so much disruption. You have like Arrow, Stegron, Cannonball, Magneto, like Spider-Man, Polaris, Juggernaut. There's so much disruption. You don't even have to worry about Silk. Silk is going to gain whatever value from the Craven, and she's just something to play on curve for the most part. And Scream and King, like, as soon as you see Kingpin on one, you should be scared. And sometimes it's like a mind game too. Like, it sort of forces you to play in that Kingpin lane. That way you don't have to get that affliction. But like, there's so much going on. They use Spider-Man to move it over, then Polaris to move it back. Like, it's a hassle. This deck is a headache. I hate seeing this deck. I'm glad I play Cosmo for the most part to stop at least half of it. But what are you thinking? Do you still see this out there in the wild?
Yeah, I still see this in the wild. And the way we were like talking about mill and stuff too, like there's just so much disrupt here. This is on the board disrupt opposed to deck and hand disrupt. So like this really offsets maybe combos you're trying to set up. Like if you're playing Destroy, you know, Polaris is moving your Deadpool or your X-23 away from when you're about to Carnage and stuff. So like it feels like a solid list. It's really interesting because this archetype was really bad before Scream, and then the week of Scream, you're like, I don't really know if this is actually going to be good. But looking at it now, it definitely has a lot of value, especially if your opponents aren't slamming like a bunch of cards down. I think this loses more to bounce than most other archetypes, but I think if you're playing 1 or 2 cards every single turn, this really can offset what you're trying to do, and I think it's totally a solid list in that standpoint.
Yeah, and I think that is it for this week. Another week. I don't know. Do you think Marvel Snap is dead, Tuck? Do you think it's dying? Do you think there's going to be a resurgence? Do you think Pokemon has taken over all the snappers in the Pokemon?
So there's a bunch of new games out at the moment. There's Bazaar, there's Pokemon Pocket, and people are trying new things. The new season for Snap is on Tuesday, and we get 2 new cards to mess around with. I think that's going to help the game overall, at least for the short term. Long term, I think there's definitely some changes they need to make with card acquisition, some more balancing, and some just more updates and that sort of communication. They've been pretty communicative, which has been great overall, but there's a couple things they probably need to adjust, maybe adding some more game modes. Like High Voltage was so great, but we only had it for a week. Maybe something like that to just continue to boost Snap, and I think the morale behind it. But until then, it's going to be probably more on the decline, not in the sense where it is dying. There's just so much coming out during this holiday season that people are just trying new things.
Yeah, and I will be going on vacation soon, so I'll be on a Disney cruise, so you won't see me at all. So yeah.
Oh my gosh, Prashant's leaving.
Oh man. But yeah, I feel like, I don't know, there's a lull. The meta is pretty much the same at the moment. Like, I think once we get new cards into Snap that everyone can create like decent decks with. Yes, we have Deadpool's Diner coming back, but I do miss High Voltage. I wish High Voltage was a thing that was always around. You just get random rewards. Like, it was a carefree game mode. You didn't have to worry about snapping. There wasn't that much like sweating. Like, you could just play the game and it's fine. No consequences if you lost the game. Where it feels like in other game modes, of course, there's consequences. But
we do a diner in November too, which maybe that'll help. But
we get those turduckens. Can't wait to get those turduckens and King Eitri. King Eitri will be the prize card. But that is it for this week. Till next week. Thank you all for watching. Be safe. Keep on snapping. And peace out.
Snap!